And what consciousness is the true I of who you are. But the mind has forgotten this. The mind doesn't go. And the mind therefore thinks the mind knows. The mind says, I know what it is. I'm a woman, I'm straight, I'm Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm gay, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a doctor, I'm a mother, you know, I'm a good person, I'm a teacher, I'm a police officer, I'm a. That's what the mind thinks I is. That's what the mind has been tricked into believing is consciousness. And what we have to do is unwrap that, disengage, and come into here so it remembers the true I, which really is pure consciousness. First of all, we need to go look, what is consciousness? What am I going to be talking about? Because consciousness is a word that can be described with a whole bunch of stuff. It can be as simple as when you're awake, you're conscious versus when you're asleep, you're not, because you can't have conscious conversation or whatever. We think of somebody like me right now as conscious, but if I was in a coma, I would not be conscious, right? That's just, it's a word that has a lot of definitions. Let's say like the Eskimos have 20 words for the word snow. So they're so specific, and snow is so important. There's 20 different words to describe it. Sanskrit has 12, I think, words for consciousness. So when they talk, they have 12 ways to really differentiate what level of consciousness they're speaking about. So we can go as simple as, is someone dead or alive? Is their brain working or not working? Any electrical activity or not? They're conscious, they're not conscious. Then it goes all the way to like spiritual conversations, like how woke, you know, or how woke is someone, or it's kind of a thing, which is really common, right? So I'm going to be talking about it in terms of like the deeper, larger, I think it's beyond spiritual. I think it is in the context that we're going to be talking about it is in the primary foundation of all of existence and creation in the universe, of all matter, energy, all dimensions. So to me, consciousness we're talking about is beyond the body and beyond the matter, and includes everything that ever was and ever will be. So consciousness, meaning it is the energy, right? It's beyond what the mind grasps with 5 senses, let's say, right? Consciousness is bigger than all of that. And it's the thing that creates all of it, right? So some of this you guys like know and accept, but I really want us to be clear on the words I'm talking about. It's, if you read some books or articles around consciousness, they might be talking, there's different states of it. So I'm talking about the really large, like capital C consciousness, that is the creative, pure energy that we talked about, some of this frequency or whatever of everything. So, and to talk about consciousness and what we're going to do over the next few months together, we also have to talk about mind. Because like, what is mind? You know, and both of these words in English and in science and in psychology, neuroscience, biology, even spirituality, and psychology don't have great definitions, because the mind and consciousness cannot be observed, tracked, or measured. So they're kind of these unfortunate invisible things in science that everybody kind of agrees upon are there. And yet we don't know how to measure, track, gauge it, observe it, test it, identify it. But everyone's kind of like, I think we agree that it's there. So the paradigm accepts it, but it's kind of a icky, gets in the way thing. And pure like scientists or whatever really wish they would go away, because they confuse things and they mess things up and they make your numbers not look good. It's why in physics they do all those adjusting and fake fixing, because you don't want to deal with consciousness or those types of ideas and energy, right? So mind is, for me, we're going to talk like big mind, capital M mind. That's a broader sense that does use brings in feelings and morals, values, and beliefs of the human, of the personality. So you have personality, you have feelings, which are neurotransmitters that are in chemicals. And it's the five senses. It's what you're interpreting, what you smell, what you see, what you hear, what you touch, what you taste, from your external environment. And there's an interpretation. That's what the mind comes up with. So it's this, and this real popular, the mind body. So the mind is this, some type of organization of lots of things. I'm going to suggest the premise I'm going to teach from the whole thing. My belief is that consciousness is even primary to that. The current paradigm would say the mind is creating consciousness. The brain creates the mind, and the mind, they create that. I'm going to say that's wrong, and it's this other thing. And if we come from that perspective, we behave differently than if we come from this perspective. So we're going to be behaving like we believe this, and why the things we're going to do are going to be powerful and why they're going to work. Okay. And so to talk about mind and consciousness and everything we're going to do in here, we're going to talk a lot about some energy in the first few lectures. And I just think it's relevant, and dealing with COVID and lockdowns and everything we're seeing in the world. Let's just hit it. Let's just start talking about perceptions and energy, right? Because we've been working, 555 has been working with energy. You've been working with your own energy. You've been working with energy of other people. You've been working, seeing what happens when energy comes together and the coefficients get multiplied, like what happens when exponential growth. You could be doing something by yourself and it's really great. You get a bunch of people and it's an exponential result. So we will continue with that, but we want to put a little bit more, I want to feed your mind that wants to know some of this stuff, and then really have you understand it's coming from a different place. So I've fed this. I'm going to start to feed this, but I'm going to give you a little bit here so you can tell this. You need to go off the line a little bit, and you need to bow and revere what's happening here. Okay. Because this is what kind of why the mind has really, it's because we brought so much cognition, so much left hemisphere logic, linear thinking, and it couldn't see holistic, why this had to be, we need them to always do this. We need them to think externally. We don't want them using the right hemisphere. I'll get into what I'm saying. Many of you know what I'm saying. That the mind had to kind of abandon the sense of consciousness. It had to actually get tricked into thinking consciousness wasn't primary, and it is therefore, which is the heart is going to help you remember consciousness is primary. And what consciousness is the true I of who you are. But the mind has forgotten this. The mind doesn't go. And the mind therefore thinks the mind knows. The mind says, I know what it is. I'm a woman, I'm straight, I'm Christian, I'm a Muslim, I'm gay, I'm a Democrat, I'm a Republican, I'm a doctor, I'm a mother, I'm a good person, I'm a teacher, I'm a police officer, I'm a. That's what the mind thinks I is. That's what the mind has been tricked into believing as consciousness. And what we have to do is unwrap that, disengage, and come into here so it remembers the true I, which really is pure consciousness. So that's why I'm kind of like, why am I talking about it? Because that big capital C consciousness is what we're talking about. All right. So this is, and so how did this kind of happen? Well, I'm going to get into some lectures. I think if you guys want it, let me know, drop down. I'm planning on doing a few lectures on kind of the history of humanity. Where did humans come from? And going into the Sophia frequency and Archon energy, like what is going on? I plan on bringing up Sumerian tablets, the Gnostic tablets, the Nag Hammadi, and talking about some of the sacred texts of what we think is really what kind of went on in the past and what we're not being told. So I really all about in this course, hopefully we're going to dive into some paradigms, but I want us to pull the curtain back and look at meta paradigms. So a meta paradigm is a larger, deeper foundation that's actually driving all the paradigms. So there are certain meta paradigms and across all of humanity on the globe right now that have created all these different paradigms of religion, education, government, money structure, all these things. I want us to go down into some of the meta paradigms because the meta paradigms are changing. They're being seen, they're being exploded, they're being unearthed. It's causing some distress and disruption. But the reality is we have a chance now to go beneath paradigms and look at some meta paradigms that many people didn't even know existed and have a chance to change them. This is one example of a meta paradigm that consciousness is not primary. Consciousness is up here and it's created from the physical matter. This is first and the brain is first, and that's what creates. That's a major paradigm that's a major meta paradigm that the world, what matters, all the value is out in physical matter, space-time matter, okay? And I've already alluded in Masters that really there's so much more energy in the space, and yet we ignore the space. And so that's a meta paradigm that, like say the physicist Nassim Haramein and others are trying to flip, saying the whole meta paradigm is wrong. Therefore, the paradigms upon which we keep investigating science are wrong. Okay, so that's what's kind of happening. We're going to be looking at some of the meta paradigms, or maybe just one in particular, and unearthing it. So it's why some of the things will seem weird because they don't make sense, because that underneath is what's made everything else, right? So in that, we're going to talk about perception. So all of us right now, everybody, perception is completely based on an extremely limited sense of information. We think we have a lot of information. We think there's so much coming at us that we can tell you is true, but the reality is you're really only getting a certain amount of information filtered into you. We talked a little bit about this I gave you the one example of the reticular activating system in your brain. That's why we do visualization, because we can change the reticular activating system. Its whole job is to only scan for what is significant, and it has to throw everything else out because it would be overwhelmed. It neurologically cannot keep up with all that sensory information coming in. You look at a Facebook page, there's so much overwhelming information. The reticular activating system knows how to throw away and disregard anything it's not trained to see. You train your reticular activating system to see what you need to see, which is why mine will see something different than someone else's, okay? And I can change mine actively if I so choose to, if I want to bring insight and awareness. So that's what the whole visualization thing is. Your brain scans for danger more than anything, and that it needs to. That's its job. It's not a bad thing. I'm so tired of people shaming the brain for keeping you alive. That's what it needs to do, okay? But you need to understand that you have a perceptual deficit. I have a perceptual deficit, okay? And it's coming from this lack of information because I can only perceive a certain bandwidth of information. And what we're going to try and do in here is increase the bandwidth of information that you see, that you feel, that you taste, that you hear, right? So if this is the information band you can access, but the information band is this big. So maybe you access this much, maybe I access that much, maybe somebody else is only accessing this side, right? Like what you're accessing in that frequency field informs your perception of what you think is information, which is what you think is reality. And not everybody's always interpreting the same. We don't have the same bandwidth of frequency. Our antennas are different. So we've talked about this a little bit before, but it's just letting you know, like, your perception of the world is not complete. I just need us to accept this. I need us to start going, oh, right, my perception is actually not complete. And Stephanie might, live in the bandwidth of humans, and she sees this. I live in the bandwidth as a human, and I see this. Somebody else in here is in a bandwidth than a human, and they've narrowed it down to here. Somebody else is in here, and it's like, holy crap, what in the hell are they interacting with? Because they're going way over here in a whole level of frequencies that most of us have no idea what that even is. And how do you see that? How are you hearing that? What? Okay. That's what I want you to just start thinking of it that way. I want every one of us to open up to be able to interact and engage with a larger bandwidth of frequency. We got frequency A to Z. I don't know where you are in there. I know humans all do a certain amount of numbers, let's say, or letters. Let's say every human can go F to M. Okay, everybody can do that. But, you know, and some people will actively try to narrow that down because they can't handle it. But we want to get, right? I'm not sure I want to go A to Z suddenly if I can only go F to M. That might be a really bad psychotic break moment for somebody, right? So let's look at it that way and have kindness with each other. So, you know, we have this frequency information field. Remember what we talked about. Your mitochondria are antennas, right? Each mitochondria is sensing your external environment. They are picking up electromagnetic field frequencies. Everything is nothing but electromagnetic signals and how you're picking that up, whether it's a photon of light, whether it's a wavelength, you know, electrical magnetic pulse, right? It's all a sparked charge and it has different ways of informing you, but that's all it is. So your brain is an antenna. It's one of the biggest ones because there's more mitochondria in there than anywhere else. Your heart is also a really big antenna because of all the mitochondria in there. It's the two largest concentrations are in these two locations. You feel and know things with your brain and your heart very quickly. Your skin can go on edge when someone walks into a room. Why? Because it sensed the frequency field shift in that energy and your body responded down to that, you know, organism level of the mitochondria and even deeper within that, because you guys understand it's protons and electrons and what's actually communicating and dialoguing inside you now, right? So we want to be able to, again, by having healthy, I'm going to suggest the healthier your mitochondria, the healthier your antenna. Okay. It's why when people get sicker and sicker and sicker, they start to misinterpret things. It also could be why a lot of highly sensitive, intuitive, psychic, you know, people we put into that category that are like, I don't know what they're seeing totally different fields. They talk to dead people, they talk to angels, they see things all the time. They're like, oh, I can see all 7 of those people in the room. That might be one of the reasons many of those people are very prone to physical problems. And I know many people often judge the spiritual types because they end up obese, autoimmune disorders, all kinds of physiological problems. They don't exercise and work out. They eat like crap, or there's a lot of that goes on. Well, at a biological basis, that person's antenna might be so wildly attuned to so much more frequency. Their mitochondria are working 10, 100, 1,000 times harder than yours. So it's real easy for you to go to the gym and lift some weights compared to what they've had to spend all their ATP doing to sense in the electromagnetic field from F to W, you know? So instead of maybe judging them and looking down on them, we could say, holy shit, they've been banging out a whole lot more exercise than I've ever been doing at the gym. So it's going to give you an idea of like perception and belief and how you can make up a different story about what's going on. But that does come down to the mitochondria because they are capturing and encoding those frequencies and changing them into like a biological piece of information for you, right? Very fascinating. So here's an example of that. Like, let me give you an idea of like how capturing information biologically can lead to misinterpretation. So everything that's going on right now, how I'm experiencing this right now, light has to come into my eye, has to hit my retina. It goes way back, hits the back of my brain, the occiput. And my brain, that lobe, creates an image. It creates a virtual reality hologram of what it thinks is out here in 3D. It thinks this, you know, what this is, seems like I'm hitting it. That whole process takes about 1/10 of a second. So in essence, I'm always experiencing my consciousness experiences, my mind experiences this consciousness of who I am as Stephanie Rimka experiences everything in a 1/10 second delay in past time. I'm never in the moment of now. And it's just a virtual reality of an image made in my brain that the mind uses morals, values, beliefs to perceive as it makes sense of it as it can. Right? Did you see that? So it's why you can have 5 people look in a room and watch something happen and have 5 very, very different recollections of what it was, because it's all kind of just a virtual reality image and experience in past tense, not real time, inside your mind, right? So the mind consciousness is kind of like everything is always outside of itself, and all it can really do is try to make sense of what's happening here. So this creation is a creation of a form in your brain is what always happens. And then it gets interpreted by these morals, values, beliefs, and experiences you've had. And that colors it. That is what informs it. That is what we call information. So to you, it might seem black and white information, right? But it's not, because it's being informed by all of that other stuff. Right? So this is what we're going to really be talking about. Like, I want you to understand the information you have coming in is always delayed, inaccurate, and a personal perception. And we're going to look at that in terms of paradigms and meta paradigms. So that's just kind of a little beginning foundation talk, but we're going to like get into, oh, so if I say things that you don't like, I want you to go, all right, that's just my perception. And it's based on this limited morals, values, and beliefs and experiences I've had. And if I can just back that up for a second and not think of things like I'm right and they're wrong and they're different than me, because we're not, right? You'll start to be that's the only way we're going to be able to start expanding how much frequency we can interpret, how much frequency we can actually gather. And it is also why I think, working on the biological health that we did in M1 matters, right? Getting these things healthier, because I want healthy antenna. So biologically making your antenna healthy is going to help you interpret more information. But we're really going to work on the kind of the spiritual practices, the shamanic things, the breathing, the motion things around it. But I'm going to give you a little bit of foundational information about it. And I am going to go ahead and get into Sumeria and Babylon and Archon. I think it's kind of fun, unless you guys are going to totally hate it and I'll start doing it and you'll be like, I hate this. I'm like, okay, well, then we'll move on. Okay. Hope that's a good little start.